Welcome to another episode of the Film Illiterates podcast. Guys, we made it. 2 episodes in 1 year.
Yeah, hooray. We're keeping up with our New Year's resolution, everybody. We've actually made progress so far. 2 podcasts in the same month. That's an improvement.
As always, I'm Joe, and with me are my co-hosts today, Nathan.
Hey guys, what's up?
And Alex.
Yo, how's it going?
All right, that's enough, Alex. You talked enough for this podcast.
I'm good, thank you.
I know
Nice
that
talking to you all.
was pretty much it. He was going to tap out after this, but no, Alex. Actually, Alex, stick around. Let us know, how have you been, man? It's been a while since we last talked.
Not too bad, man. Moved to a new place, so it's working out. But it's going pretty much the same since we last talked. Not a whole lot has changed out here.
Have you made friends with the rats in the basement already?
Yeah, man, they're pretty nice.
Yeah.
They keep stealing my monster here, but
Hey, you know what? They kind of think that's like the payoff. If you're invading in their space, they're going to have some of your drink.
Yeah, got to pay my dues, I guess.
Exactly.
You guys are animals.
We're always been animals. There's the beast in all of us, Joe.
Today we have a very special episode of the Film Illiterates podcast because every episode is special. Krzysztof Kieslowski's 3 Colors trilogy, Michael Haneke's Glaciation trilogy, and now, with Glass opening this week, M. Night Shyamalan will be rounding out his Eastrail 177 trilogy. Today, we will be looking at the first 2 movies in this thematic trilogy, 2000's Unbreakable and 2016's Split. And fair warning, we will be getting into heavy spoilers on both movies. We're going to be diving into these 2 movies, how they connect, and potentially how they could be leading into Glass opening this week. Let's get started. But before we start talking about that, we're going to talk about what we've watched on our own recently. So, Alex, since you've been away for a while and coming back now, tell us, what have you been watching lately?
Starting with me, huh?
Of course, I'm starting with you.
You're the first year. It's the icebreaker, man. We always go through this routine. So
fair. I've actually been getting into a little bit more of, kind of like the stuff that I always watch. I watch a lot of YouTube, a lot of gaming stuff. I've been getting into watching Twitch a lot lately. Watching a lot of Overwatch, and recently a lot of Destiny 2 streamers on there. So that's mostly been what I've been getting into, like during my overnight shifts. But other than that, I've been getting into a bit more anime recently. I started the series Goblin Slayer after pretty much like the internet kind of blew up about it. That's been pretty cool so far. Still got to catch up quite a bit, but
could you give us a quick little synopsis of Goblin Slayer?
Yeah. There's a guy. His name is Goblin Slayer, and he kills goblins. That's pretty much the anime. That's
very
kind of what it is.
self-explanatory. Very self-explanatory.
Yeah. I mean, that's the basic idea of it. There's other stuff that goes on. He has a new adventurer set in like a fantasy land. He has a new adventurer with them. He's working with, and a bunch more stuff. I've only kind of gotten into the first 4 episodes or so, where it's kind of mostly setting up the world, and I don't think it's really gotten too heavily into the what's going to be the overarching plot, but I'm digging it so far. It's simple. It's not some real high-minded concept. It's good. But other than that, I started also watching. There's another. It's a shorter series. It's called Skull-Faced Bookseller Honda-san.
That is the best title for anything ever.
Actually, a lot of Japanese animes actually have very, very good anime titles. Like they're very misleading, but they stick with you.
Well, this one's not misleading because the guy literally he's a skeleton, so he's got a skull face, and he sells books. That's kind of like Goblin Slayer describing everything in the title. This one describes it in the title as well. It's fun. It's a really short one where like each episode is only about 11 minutes. But it's just kind of the goings on of someone working at a bookstore in Japan, and it's pretty great. Main character's hilarious. A lot of good stuff in it. It's very fun. Very fun. Very easy to watch. That's essentially kind of what I've been up or been watching. I've still been playing a lot of Destiny still listening to a lot of music. So
Yeah, well, we'll have to definitely do a podcast on music one of these days, Alex, and we'll definitely have to have you lead that conversation.
hell yeah, man, I'd be down.
Cool.
I don't listen to modern music, so
Get out of here.
The stuff I listen to, like if you see my playlist, it's just all stuff from like the 60s through the 80s, and then classical music.
Joe, we got to turn you on to some good stuff, man.
Yeah, you can try. You can try
some 90s R&B and some slasher music. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go next if that's okay with you, Nate.
Sure.
So I actually got a chance yesterday to go to the Seattle Cinerama Theater, which was my first time being there. I've been to the Cinerama Theater in LA, but I've never been to the one in Seattle, despite it being closer to me now. So I decided to go there yesterday, and guys, just like the big screen experience it's great if you can get a theater like this, like one of these big event theaters with the wide, the super huge wide screen, and the stadium seating and the balconies and everything. It was great. It just the whole experience was a ton of fun. The movie I went to go see was, they were showing James Cameron's The Terminator, the original, the one that started it all. And it's a good movie. It's a great movie. It's not the sort of movie I've found that necessarily needs to be seen on the big screen, though. It was great. The sound was phenomenal this time. Just hearing all those special effects and the lasers and the music, that booming score, those opening titles were just amazing to watch, posted on this gigantic screen. With the rumbling theme underneath everything.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, Joe, of the last time we were up at the Cinedrome Theater in LA to watch James Cameron's Aliens.
That's right. So both times I've been to a CinemaScope theater with James Cameron movies.
So I will also test that, nothing does replace an experience quite like that. So if anyone has not had the chance to experience definitely check your local listings. If you live in the LA area near the Cinedrome or somewhere up there in Seattle, please make some time to see one of those films. It's something you will not regret.
Yeah. The Terminator, though, interestingly, seeing it projected on such a large screen this time, and I was sitting probably about 5 rows back from the front, which I was afraid was going to be overwhelming, but it was fine. I was able to see everything without craning my neck, which was great. But I noticed small details that James Cameron, I don't think, wanted the audience to notice, just because it was right there in your face. For instance, matte paintings were kind of a little bit shaky, and that really stands out when it's blown up on this giant screen. Or there's one scene where they're in one of the future sequences, there's a car that flips over and blows up, and you see in the wreckage there's like a clear mannequin, was supposed to be a guy, but it's a mannequin on fire, and it stands out. But guys, the thing about Terminator's effects are dated. The movie is fantastic. It works as this great thriller, sci-fi horror.
I mean,
movie.
It changed everything that we know about time travel and thriller movies all in one movie. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the movie itself, though, from an effects standpoint, they didn't have a huge budget going in, and the effects are fairly dated to varying degrees. Some are better than others. But the one effect that has never aged very well is Arnold's rubber face when he's changing out his eye, the eyeball surgery. And there's a couple of shots there where it's just an animatronic Arnold Schwarzenegger head. And that has never looked great. It's a cool shot, but the effect itself has never looked great. On this Cinerama screen, it was just like people were laughing in the theater just because it's so like in your face right there, this big rubber face. But the experience was great. People cheered at all the lines, and I'll be back and all that stuff. People laughed and cheered every time the psychiatrist was on screen. So it was great. It was fantastic. 10 out of 10. So tying into that, though, the next movie that I'm going to talk about that I watched was Black Moon Rising. It's a movie from 1986, also starring Linda Hamilton. And this one has Tommy Lee Jones. It is from IMDb. A thief is hired by the Justice Department to steal incriminating tapes from a corrupt corporation. The tapes vanish when Quint hides them in the back of a hydromatic-powered racing car that is stolen by a hot car ring. So it's basically Tommy Lee Jones plays a thief, a professional thief, who steals a future car, or he has to steal a future car because it's got some tapes that he needs hidden in the back. And it's part, 80s thriller, kind of street thriller, part heist movie. And it's a lot of fun. Linda Hamilton shows up. She's in a sex scene that's almost shot for shot, exactly like the sex scene from the Terminator, which was very strange.
It's so weird that you recognize that.
Yeah. So basically, Joe's trying to admit that he is actually trying to find all the films that Linda Hamilton is in, all the soft core porn scenes.
We're gonna rate the top 10 smutty Linda Hamilton scenes in movies.
Yeah,
that's terrible. That's terrible.
I know, because you dig a lot into that, you're gonna find some unpleasant stuff. Oh.
The movie itself though is a lot of fun. It's not top tier 80s pulp, but it's worth a decent watch if you're into 80s kind of. See, the movie isn't sci-fi, despite having kind of fringe sci-fi elements. It's basically
okay.
I mean, it's this future car. They jump it between skyscrapers, just like in Furious 7. So
it has been more like a Furious 7 meets Repo Man in a way.
Yeah, but the future elements, I mean, the sci-fi elements are really just kind of like the building, the skyscraper they have to steal the car out of, has high-tech future security measures. And there's lots of goons running around with machine guns, and this car is sleek and it's designed by a guy who works for NASA in the movie, and all that kind of stuff. Basically, it's a guy who works for NASA built a future car that goes real fast.
Oh gosh,
it's a decent movie. I would recommend. Finally, I'm going to talk about Shout Factory, the boutique Blu-ray company distributor. They recently released a copy of The Plague Dogs on Blu-ray.
So this is the movie that you introduced Kateri to?
Oh yes, this is Kateri's first animated movie, was The Plague Dogs. No, Kateri did not watch The Plague Dogs. For those that don't know, The Plague Dogs is a 1982 movie. 2 dogs escape from a laboratory and are hunted as possible carriers of the bubonic plague. So this movie, though, I hadn't seen it before. I blind bought it from Shout Factory because I kind of have a personal connection to The Plague Dogs as a property, because this was directed by the same guy who directed Watership Down, and it's based on a book which was also written by the same guy who wrote Watership Down. And when I was a kid or in high school or way back then, I read Watership Down, and then I read The Plague Dogs right after that. And The Plague Dogs had a much heavier impact on me. I enjoyed that one a lot more as a kid. It kind of hit me a little closer to home, and I just connected with the characters a lot more, because it's really just these 2 dogs on the run from an experimental laboratory that's been torturing them with scientific experiments, and these dogs are just trying to find an owner. And the book does a great job of getting you into these dogs' heads, because the dogs talk, but they act like dogs, even though they talk and we can understand them. But everything they say is very relatable, as in, oh, if a dog could talk, this is the sort of thing it would think about and the sort of thing it would say. And the book got that across very well, and that translated into the movie wonderfully. The movie is very, very bleak. It's one of the bleakest movies I've ever seen. Yeah. And it's just, an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, if you watch the extended cut, of just these animated dogs trying to survive in this wilderness while they're being hunted down, and all just the worst, horrible shit happens to them. And it's a downer of a movie. If you love dogs, I would definitely recommend you should watch If You Love Dogs, because you'll love this movie. I take back everything I said. If you're a dog lover, watch this movie. It's the most heartwarming, joy-filled thing you've ever seen. But no, yeah, I would highly recommend The Plague Dogs for people that I think could make it through the movie. There are certain people this movie will probably be triggering for, but for those that can stand it, it's a wonderful movie. Even just the way they animate the dogs, it's a very grown-up movie. It is not an animated movie for kids. I think it was given a PG-13 rating on release. Guys, this is a borderline R-rated movie.
Very much so. I will definitely say I've seen the movie as well, and I'll say to people, if you can get past the first 3 minutes of this film, just the first 3 minutes alone, you'll survive.
The opening credits are just dark red over black over the sound of a dog drowning. Like that's how they open the movie.
Wow.
Jeez,
That's
Joe,
just
why'd
the
you give it
tone
away?
for what you're getting in for.
Amazing.
Why'd you give it away?
No, I'm not giving away the end of the movie. Just wait till you get there.
I know, but that's what I was like. You just let them watch and experience for themselves. Don't let that slip out of the way. Right? Spoilers.
There's spoilers for the opening shot of the plague dogs.
I know.
When did you say this came out?
1982.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I watched the extended the UK cut, which I think they cut like 18 minutes of the movie, including one of the goriest shots of the movie was actually cut out of the US release. But that's what I watched was the extended edition of the movie, and so I don't know. I can't compare it to the theatrical edition in the US because I've never seen the US version. Still, it's included on the Blu-ray. Maybe one day I'll check it out and see what was all that was taken out. But that is what I watched recently.
Nice. I'm gonna have to check that one out. That sounds good.
It's a fantastic movie. You would like it, Alex. You should come over sometime from San Diego up to Seattle, and we'll have a movie night.
On a nice rainy day. Yeah, when there's like it's dark outside and there's no heat anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Very romantic evening right there.
Yes.
All right, Nate. What have you been watching lately?
Okay, so recently I revisited a film I have recently watched already, only because this movie is on Netflix right now, and my roommate was watching it with his girlfriend. But I also went and saw it on the big screen. I saw Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. Basically, this film is an autobiographical portrait of Alfonso when he was growing up with his family in Mexico, and they had a maid who lived with them who was kind of part of the family. And so this film, as he's kind of told many critics out there, is kind of like a tribute to her, where, you know, there was this time while growing up, while they were going through a kind of a traumatic family experience, and how she played a part in all of their lives. And this is kind of like his love letter to her and his way of saying, like, you know, we appreciate you so much for what you have been for us and what we weren't able to do for you. But the movie is as simplistic and as bleak as it is. It's shot in black and white, and there's not a whole lot of action that happens throughout the whole film, but it's gorgeous. Like the way he is able to recreate 1970s Mexico and just that environment and landscape is done beautifully. And you could tell, like, even though this was something like right after he had, like, with all the success he did with Gravity, he could have done any project, and yet he chose this. And there's just so much heart and so much beauty to it that there's just a lot of stuff that he tackles with. And there's a lot of stuff that Alfonso Cuarón is really good at in all of his films, how he explores, you know, humanity and life and love. And it just all comes into this. And he does a very interesting, unique twists on it. But some of the shots in here are very impressive for it just being very simple camera work. I mean, there's a beach shot that it's just like an entire scene just done in one take, but how he's able to pull that off in just one take is quite impressive. I enjoyed it, but for anyone who is looking for something on more of, like, you know, Children of Men or Gravity level, don't expect that with this film. It's kind of more of like a very simple kind of a movie. In fact, some of the shots you will probably think to yourself, what's going on with the shot? But anyway, that's what I watched or rewatched, really. And then another classic that I watched was Blazing Saddles. I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan, and this was kind of the film that I saw years ago when I was a kid. And to this day, the comedy still holds up. And that's one thing that continues to impress me about this movie, is that even though this was like back in 1974, and a lot of stuff that was coming out was very racy and very, you know, taboo at the time, today most people would look at it and it's like, it's dated. But honestly, I think the comedy still works for me. And I think Joe, Alex, have you guys seen Blazing Saddles?
Oh, it's a great movie. It's probably my favorite Mel Brooks movie. I think I showed that to Katie for the first time actually within the past year or two, and it's definitely up there. I wouldn't say the movie's dated. I think the jokes, if anything, are more relevant today than ever.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I do love about the movie as well, is that the way it was able to just poke fun at race and just political issues and just like a lot of stuff that Hollywood just did not want to touch at the time. And today the comedy is still like, it's a good template of like what comedy is and what it should be and how it should continue to be. And one thing I like about Mel Brooks is I think his comedy shines the best back in the 70s. There's also some stuff he did back in the 90s, like, Robin Hood Men in Tights, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. And they're okay, but there's just something about when he shot his comedies in the 70s that it's just, they're gems to watch. And even just his shot steps and how he directs certain scenes, it just fits within that proscenium. My favorite scenes continue to be the governor scenes where Mel Brooks is this cross-eyed governor and him like bantering off of with Harvey Korman. It's fantastic. So if anyone has not watched it, drop everything and watch it.
Okay. All right. See you guys later.
Yeah. So that's it, everyone else.
No, Alex. No, Alex.
No, I've heard like nothing but good things about that, but I just haven't actually put in the time to getting around to it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any Mel Brooks movies, Alex?
He must have at least.
Maybe.
Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs.
Spaceballs. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Spaceballs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's. I feel like Spaceballs is the one where if you haven't seen any other Mel Brooks movies, you've at least seen Spaceballs. Like, it's so ingrained in the public consciousness.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are more familiar with Spaceballs just because we have such a huge Star Wars fandom that that movie just makes fun of like Star Wars to a T.
Yeah, I feel like if anyone's watched Star Wars or like gotten into it in any sort of capacity, you've at least heard about it, if not watched Spaceballs. And
exactly.
I do like that one. That was good.
Yeah.
Nathan, have you seen anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's pretty much it. I think everything else I was just watching was to just talk about today for our Eastrail 177 trilogy.
Alrighty,
I actually did have one thing I forgot to mention during mine.
Shoot.
And it wasn't what I watched, but rather more of what I listened to. I actually finalized my like top 20 albums of the year of last year. So I finally set the time aside, figured that all out from like a 40 plus albums or so that I originally had on my list. But I ended up going with I think my favorite album of the year was kind of a smaller band called Wayfarer. Their album World's Blood, which is a absolutely solid piece of like atmospheric black metal and post metal album. So if you're interested in any of those genres at all, that's definitely one to really start off with, because the opening track is gonna hook you in like nothing else. I think I listened to that one way more than a lot of the other albums.
Do you have a favorite genre of music, Alex?
Not really. There's I listen to a bunch of different stuff, so I can't really say I have a specific favorite. There's a bunch of genres where there's a bunch of genres that I really like and I get a lot out of. For me, that's a lot of post rock, a lot of atmospheric black metal. Recently, this past year, I actually really got into screamo and not so much like what most people think of screamo is, which is like a lot of like Under Oath or like metalcore bands, but like like early 2000s, a little bit of the late 90s, and kind of what's coming up is almost like the screamo revival with like Jillian Carter and like Cassis and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we'll actually have a reference somewhere. We'll play a clip of what some of the music that Alex is talking about, just to give a taste of the audiences.
I'm not sure if you want to, because you might scare some people off with that.
No, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
Go for it.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I am so outside the common or the current musical arena that I really have no idea like what's out there today and what people are into. Like I think the last album I really got psyched for was when John Carpenter released an album.
Oh my gosh!
Just because I love John Carpenter, but and I love his music. But that just shows you just kind of how uneducated I am when it comes to the modern musical scene.
Yeah, I remember that. I think it was Lost Themes. That was good, but
Lost Themes 2, and after that.
Oh yeah. I forgot about the second one. But I mean, well, there's stuff we can get you into. I mean, right now, I don't know. I really don't go off of like what's kind of on the top 40 charts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Which is probably
really...
what I hear the most commonly, just like
Exactly.
on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, there's everything that's like any genres of old are still around, or any genres that used to be super popular. Just because they're not on the top 40s, list doesn't mean that they just don't exist anymore. There are hundreds of thousands of artists doing independent work, signed to smaller labels, that are still releasing not only albums, like new albums that are, reinventing older genres or mixing newer genres together. There's a lot of stuff out there that just, I guess for lack of a better term, sounds old. It sounds like it has a classic like a style to it. So there's always, I mean, if you're not psyched about what's being, what you're listening to on the radio, there is still a bunch of stuff that you can really dig into. You just gotta kind of look for it and dig for it a little bit.
For the long and short of it all, basically the music scene is pretty much just like the movie scene. Like, there are so many different people doing indie stuff or studio projects. You really have to find what your palette is most, lenient towards, and just kind of go with it. So I don't know, Alex, maybe we should do a podcast on some music, since, it makes sense to be on a podcast. So I don't know.
Welcome to Music Illiterates.
Yeah, music illiterates.
We could school Joe on everything. That'd be great.
Exactly. We'll do that.
a new section called Joe Got Schooled in Music. Alrighty, and with that, we are now ready to go into our main topic of discussion.
What do you want? I am here to see if tales of the extraordinary being are true. May I meet the beast?
I'm Mary Reynolds.
I need your abilities to get us all out of here and show the world we exist. That sounds like the bad guys teaming up.
Glass opens up this week. This is the third M. Night Shyamalan movie in his Eastrail 177 trilogy, which began with Unbreakable, continued with Split, and is now concluding this year, bringing the two movies together. So let's just get started with you, Nathan. So what's your history with Unbreakable and Split? When was the first time you watched them, and what was your reaction to the ending of Split the first time you saw it?
Okay, so yeah, to kind of go off of that, I mean, I remember watching Unbreakable at the time when I guess M. Night was getting really popular after The Sixth Sense. People were looking to him as like the man who makes these thrillers with a twist at the end. So kind of going into Unbreakable, the way it was like, it felt like it was marketed as like, kind of similar in that same vein. And then when I saw it, I think the way I approached it was, I think at the time I was a little young to kind of really get into it. But then over the years, as I've kind of revisited again and watched it again, as I kind of delved more into the geek culture and that comic book culture, I see that it's a very smart movie in what it's trying to do. Only because what it's trying to do is do a different take on the superhero genre without it being so bluntly obvious that it's a superhero movie. And in reality, he's trying to show what would superpowers be like in real life. It wouldn't be anything like you would see, in the Marvel universe or even just the Dark Knight trilogy universe. You are kind of getting just real people doing, these unbelievable things, and just in the context of, well, this is the world that they live in. And so I thought, just kind of looking back and revisiting it again, I've come to appreciate Unbreakable the more times as I've watched it, and kind of watching it again, I was able to pick up on a lot more of that. And I think it is still one of M. Night Shyamalan's strongest works. As far as Split goes, revisiting that film, Joe, I remember when it first came out, you were super hyped about that movie. And I think one of the things that I was drawn to with Split was just Jamie McAvoy's acting. The way it was marketed, what critics were saying about him at the time was, this is a movie that's showing James McAvoy's chops as an actor. It was something that he got a lot of just carte blanche to just like, develop all of these 23 different personalities and bring them into one character. And that's a huge feat. But I remember watching it and just being the most impressed about that. The rest of the movie it felt very uncomfortable for me. M. Night Shyamalan was kind of like starting to kind of expose a little bit more of this darker underlying of the human, psyche. But overall, just enjoying James McAvoy's acting altogether. It's the one thing that kind of carried me through the whole movie.
So I grew up with M. Night Shyamalan movies because he made when did The Sixth Sense come out?
1999.
Yeah, so I didn't see The Sixth Sense when it first came out, but it was one of the ones that I went back to see after I saw Signs, which I think was kind of the first M. Night Shyamalan movie that really hooked me in, because I would have been 11 years old when Signs came out. And it blew me away. At the time, that was the scariest movie I'd ever seen. And since then, I've kind of reevaluated the movie and the rest of M. Night Shyamalan's filmography over the years. But at the time, I watched Signs and I had to go back and I watched The Sixth Sense for the first time. And the one M. Night Shyamalan movie that kind of skipped me by at the time was Unbreakable. And I don't think I saw that one until I was in high school or maybe even college. I don't remember. It was a while after, Shyamalan's quote unquote fall from grace.
Yeah.
That I watched Unbreakable. But I'd always heard that it was one of his better movies, but no one really seemed to talk about it. And when I saw it, I liked it. I thought Unbreakable was great. And it's kind of grown in my esteem over the years. I watched it for, I think, maybe the third or fourth time just this past week in preparation for this podcast. And it's easily, for me right now, it's his second best movie, right under The Sixth Sense. Split, when that came out, I was greatly looking forward to it because this is right after Shyamalan's kind of resurgence with The Visit, which was the first movie to not get entirely panned by everybody in quite a while. So we had heard for years, and we'll talk about this a little bit more about how valid this is, but we'd heard for years that he always wanted to do a sequel to Unbreakable. And I just kind of figured it would never happen at this point because it had been so long. He had tried to build himself back up at this point. And we just kind of thought, all right, well, we'll never see a sequel to Unbreakable. Everyone's kind of forgot about it. So when I went to go see Split, it was, I thought it was a fairly decent movie. I saw it in theaters. I was excited for it. I thought it actually was a pretty great movie. Overall, I wasn't in love with it, but, it was kind of like, this is good enough. M. Night's back. I can firmly say he's making good movies again. I can't wait to see what he's doing next. But that ending stinger that ties the movie back into Unbreakable, I didn't know that was coming. I had heard that there were twists at the time. When the movie ended, I kind of was thinking that they're like, well, that was a good movie, but I don't see like the big twist was. What the twist was that he was in a zoo the whole time. I mean, that was not really that big of a twist.
No.
And then they revealed Bruce Willis at the end there. And I just lost my mind. I was like for a man known for twist endings, I still didn't see that coming because it was so outside the realm of possibility. Wait, he's just coming back. Now he's making a sequel to Unbreakable. Wait, but the rights issues, my head was like trying to wrap myself around how this was working. And the guy sitting next to me, this total stranger, was just like, oh my gosh. And his girlfriend was like, huh? What? I don't get it. And that was kind of like the theater was just split on like, half the people.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. I'll be here all night. but the theater was really divided on people who got what was going on there and people who just never seen or even heard of Unbreakable. They're just there for the new McAvoy movie.
They just want to see Charles Xavier basically be bald and wear a dress.
Exactly. Yeah. So I quite enjoy Split, and I'm looking forward to Glass and seeing how they tie it all into it. But I have always been on board the M. Night Shyamalan train, even through all the years that he'd been making The Last Airbender and The Happening. I've kind of been sitting on the sidelines just waiting for him to come back because there is enough talent in Unbreakable and in The Sixth Sense to show you that there is a skilled filmmaker and storyteller hidden in here somewhere, and he's just going through a real rough patch of just whatever he's working through, and I'm just waiting for him to come back. I'm happy that I'm vindicated all these years for waiting for him.
Every one of us has to wait in a chair, and Barry, he decides who stands in the light, but Barry lost that power because of me. I can push myself into the light anytime I want. It's a special power.
Yeah, so Alex, you saw a Split just for the first time today, is that right?
Yeah, actually, yeah, just earlier today. I had, when I saw that it was coming out, and I watched the trailer, I was kind of psyched for it. I thought it was pretty cool. I never made it to see it in theaters and waited for, a long ass time to actually see it. But no, kind of like what you were saying, Joe. It seemed like M. Night Shyamalan was kind of coming back into his own, coming back into a lot better content for his movies. So it was nice to see that, and nice to see people getting hyped up about it. I had seen Unbreakable years ago. I remember not thinking of it so much as a superhero movie. I do remember thinking of it more as a thriller. It never struck me as a superhero movie, but I kind of liked that. I didn't, I liked that it was a bit more grounded, I guess you could say. It wasn't over the top at all. Maybe the ideas that they were kind of presenting were a little bit more, but the way that it showed that really didn't push it. I haven't really been too big a fan of M. Night Shyamalan. I've only seen a few of his movies.
Yeah.
Watched Sixth Sense years ago. I know a lot of people don't really like it, but I actually kind of liked The Village. I remember seeing that and was pretty intrigued by it.
I think, if anything, one thing I'll say about The Village is I liked what he was going with that concept.
Mm-hmm.
I liked what ideas and themes he was presenting. I kind of felt like that was just at a time where he was kind of stumbling on his own trademarks and his own cliches, and I think that was getting in the way with a lot of like what he was trying to say in that film. Because I think if he had just basically done away with that and not had to follow like the same template that he'd been doing with like Unbreakable, Sixth Sense, Signs, I think it would have been a stronger movie, because there's a lot of elements in it that are great. And maybe you're right, Joe and Alex, is that M. Night Shyamalan is not necessarily a thriller director, but he uses like thriller elements to tell the stories he wants to tell, which are not always kind of like belonging to like one genre or another. They're kind of their own little thing. And I think maybe that's the reason why he's able to kind of create that hallmark for himself, that, what makes an M. Night Shyamalan film. And I think that's just something that, made something he's basically had to learn the hard way, had to learn some mistakes from. But I think that's one thing that, all these movies have kind of like just work.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about looking at Unbreakable and Split in the same context as part of a trilogy, is that when you see that they're connected, it's easy to see how they kind of match together. But just kind of on their own, they're very different movies. Unbreakable is more of a drama. It's trying to take a superhero concept and grounding it in some sort of reality. It's saying, okay, what if these superhero stories aren't about people with fantastic abilities and futuristic technology and giant supervillains? What if it's just about a guy who just can't get hurt and he's struggling to save his marriage? And he's up against another guy who's just a terrorist and a mastermind. And it takes everything and makes it small scale, which is nice to see in a superhero type movie.
And actually, that's something I wanted to kind of comment on, especially with Bruce Willis's character Unbreakable. One thing that Samuel L. Jackson's character points out is like, you could be anything. You could have done a lot more with your life. Why are you being a security guard at this stadium and, just dealing with just this kind of crowd of people all the time? You could do more with your life. And that's kind of an interesting concept where it's like, you're right, Joe. It's grounding this idea in reality. And someone like that would see his purpose in that kind of a setting. Like, he can still do good. He can still try to help people on a regular basis, but not have to take all that kind of glory. And even like, him surviving this train crash that happens, it's still something that he doesn't take any pride in, or something that he likes, this idea that all these people died. It brings to the forefront that was one thing I've always wanted to see in a superhero like genre. And M. Night just was bold enough to make that statement.
And if you look at Unbreakable, it really is a smaller drama at its heart, and it's a quieter movie, and Bruce Willis is a very introspective character. And it's interesting to compare that to Split, because once you look at Split in that context, in the context of a quote unquote superhero type story, it's kind of the same thing. And the movie takes a lot of opportunities to point out that Kevin's abilities here are just it's an exaggeration, or should I say, what you see in comic books is an exaggeration of the sorts of things that Kevin has. So Kevin has these abilities, and the movie wants to show you that his abilities are something different, something new, something not supernatural, but kind of beyond what the human body can actually do. But it's not quite far enough to make it extraordinary and amazing like these big comic book stories. So in that way, it's kind of the same thing in that it's taking a comic book topic and grounding it.
I've studied the form of comics intimately. I spent a third of my life in a hospital bed with nothing else to do but read. I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history. The Egyptians drew on walls. Countries all over the world still pass on knowledge through pictorial forms. I believe comics are a form of history that someone somewhere felt or experienced. Then, of course, those experiences and that history got chewed up in the commercial machine, got jazzed up, made titillating cartoon for the sale rack. This city has seen its share of disasters. I watched the aftermath of that plane crash. I watched the carnage of the hotel fire. I watched the news, waiting to hear a very specific combination of words, but they never came. Then one day I saw a news story about a train accident, and I heard them. There is a sole survivor, and he is miraculously unharmed. I have something called osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a genetic disorder. I don't make a particular protein very well, and it makes my bones very low in density, very easy to break. I've had 54 breaks in my life, and I have the tamest version of this disorder, type 1. There are type 2, type 3, type 4. Type 4s don't last very long. So that's how it popped into my head. If there is someone like me in the world, and I'm at one end of the spectrum, couldn't there be someone else, the opposite of me at the other end? Someone who doesn't get sick, who doesn't get hurt like the rest of us. And he probably doesn't even know it. The kind of person these stories are about.
So on the outset, it looks like Split and Unbreakable are kind of doing the same thing, but the difference is in the execution. And over, the past, 20 years, the way that M. Night is approaching the subject matter is very different. Because just like in The Visit, Split plays into the unnatural dialogue for comedy. And a lot of the things that Kevin says is very funny, but it's funny not because it's necessarily jokey. It's funny because no one talks like that. And one of the best examples I think of this is in the opening of the movie, where there's a father talking to his two daughters about whether or not to leave the main character Casey at this birthday party or whether they should give her a ride home. And one of the lines that he says just sounds so unnatural. I was thinking, like, nobody talks like this. Did I convey that this was a democracy? We're not leaving her here.
That just goes back to like those trademark styles that M. Night has kind of built himself up over the years. It's like you can tell that's like something that would belong in an M. Night Shyamalan film. Yeah,
exactly. But whereas in something like Lady in the Water and The Happening, I don't feel like he was very aware of how cringeworthy his dialogue was. I think now he knows that people find that funny and awkward, and he just runs with it. And a lot of things he had, and that plays in James McAvoy's
Are you talking about Hedwig or even just like Dennis, like the different personalities?
For any of the personalities. But and that plays into James McAvoy's advantage here, because when he's going crazy with these different personalities, he's just able to have fun with it and deliver these lines like, all right, just don't take any of this seriously. Hedwig can talk about one topic and then switch over to another one at any second. When he's acting as I forget what the woman personality's name was. He said,
Patricia. It's Patricia.
Yeah. I can just stand up and just kind of walk a little bit more aloof and have these weird twitches. And I think he's just having a lot of fun with this movie. So whereas Unbreakable is a grounded, dramatic, almost somber movie, Split is just a crazy, wacky, very uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, because I do want to kind of bring that to attention. Is as much as like you're saying, Joe, like he is kind of acknowledging the fun that you can have with his dialogue. I still don't think Split is actually a fun movie to watch, just because of what it delves into with the human psyche and just some things that humans are capable of doing and what draws them to that. I mean, there's this whole like B storyline that's going on with the girl Casey's character, which is very unpleasant, and that ties in a lot with what James McAvoy's Kevin's character has undergone all of his life. And I think M. Night Shyamalan is really trying to also address something about the human condition, and bringing that to the light of this universe he is creating, or just story, this narrative he's trying to tell with these three movies.
Wait. No. Don't do that. Don't do that. He can't handle reality. My name is Jade. Has Dr. Fletcher been getting our emails? This is what we have to do. As in 1008, when Anantapala suffered the Shahi's most crushing defeat, and Mahmud overran the entirety of the Punjab region, taking the famed temple of Kangra, we have been wronged by this alliance, this horde of Patricia, Dennis, and the boy. Their actions do not represent us. They are everybody just take a minute. Oh, baby girl. They've been stealing control of their life from me, but their group are gonna work through this. Honey, my name is Barry. You shouldn't have used the walkie-talkie.
Yeah, it's the Casey storyline with her whole past and the sexual abuse with her uncle.
Mm-hmm.
I have mixed feelings about that, because I think that M. Night at heart wants to tackle serious subjects, and he's always tackled topics that are important to him, such as in Signs he tackled a crisis of faith and what it means to have trust in a higher power. And he's always done this. But in Split is the first time that he's dealt with something so kind of uncomfortable, with specifically child sexual abuse, which is a very heavy topic.
It is, yeah.
And I'm not convinced that what he does with it here necessarily justifies it being in the movie. And I think part of that is with how Casey as a character is dealt with ultimately at the end of the movie. Because
that was actually, I was going to comment on that. That was the one thing I did not like too much about how that movie ended, was it left it on that note. And here's the thing, kind of, I know we're going to go talking into this about this being a trilogy and shared universe, but I'm wondering if this is going to be something that M. Night Shyamalan is going to try to conclude or wrap up in this Glass movie. I don't know, he's thinking about bringing Casey back into the story, if she's going to play a part in this narrative he's telling, but that's
she is in the next one.
Okay, so she is.
Okay, good.
So that might be something that they're going to try to resolve, because that was the one problem I had with Split, is they'd never resolved that. And I feel like maybe kind of going into this movie Glass, maybe that's something M. Night Shyamalan is going to try to conclude with. I think thing that he's trying to explore with Casey is something that is, he's kind of like trying to explain in all these three characters, Kevin, Bruce Willis, as well as Samuel L. Jackson's character, all playing into how she's going to turn out into the end. What choices can she make? Where she fall in line in the story of the human condition. So I don't know, like, we'll have to see. But I feel like you're right, Joe. Maybe how he handled it could have been a little bit better, but I think there is a place, or there's a reason why he put that in Split the way he did.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same problem with the ending. It's just it left off there, and that was the kind of like major point that I didn't really care for in the movie. Was just her story ended there. And I was just like, why? After setting it up through so many flashbacks and playing such like an important role in the very end of the film, I was so disappointed that we didn't see a resolution to that. It was frustrating.
I'm not convinced that M. Night doesn't think he concluded her arc in Split. And we'll see when Glass comes out, because Glass has the potential to fix a lot of my issues with this, because I think on the surface, there's a very interesting thing to be said here. And I have to go into some details about the actual plot. So if you go back to in Split, when she has the flashback to seeing her confrontation with her uncle, where she's a little girl holding the gun on her uncle, and she doesn't pull the trigger, even after he abused her. And I want to say what M. Night Shyamalan's going for is showing that she regrets not pulling the trigger all those years ago, and her confrontation with the beast at the end of the movie is her way to rectify that by pulling the trigger on the beast. She's in another situation where there is an aggressor who has held her against her will, and she's going to pull the trigger now. This is her big moment of redemption. And she pulls the trigger and nothing happens. The beast is still around, and she wasn't able to kill him. I think on the surface, that is a fascinating thing to explore, in that she regrets not taking violence against her aggressor all those years ago. And now she takes violence against a new aggressor and finds out that, no, actually violence was not the answer all along. You had to get out of the situation and expose him for what he is, as opposed to just killing him. That's not the way to make the problem go away. And I think that is an interesting route to explore. I'm not convinced that M. Night Shyamalan knew that he was doing that, or was necessarily very aware of that, because in the end, the beast gets away. Like she only escapes because he lets her live. And that's really the problematic part with this whole thing for me, in that if he was going that route with that whole talking about if violence accomplishes anything in terrible situations, that's interesting. But if he was going with that route, I don't feel like he knew how to conclude it properly. And the only way that you could conclude that is have her sitting in the car at the end and telling the cops about her uncle. The fact that he leaves that open to interpretation at the end bothers me.
Well,
because that shouldn't be open. If she goes back to her uncle, what was all this for? What was the whole backstory for? It all makes no sense. It only makes sense if she tells the cop about it.
So I'm going to kind of maybe move on from this, if it's okay, and kind of get into this topic of these three movies. Is this kind of like, how does this work as a trilogy? Obviously it is a trilogy. These already come out as that, but does this work more as like a shared universe kind of series, or is this actually like a cinematic trilogy? Because both are different kinds of universes when you think about it. And I actually have this affirmation of like what M. Night Shyamalan has presented with these three films, and maybe what he brought up or didn't resolve yet with Casey's story arc is actually something he's been trying to say all along with these three films. I actually have a firm belief that maybe what we're going to see in Glass with Casey's character, Joe, maybe what you kind of propose that she is going to do and how she'll play a part in the Glass story is going to be something what he's aimed for this whole entire trilogy to talk about.
Yeah. Do you have any expectations for how they're going to tie these three movies, Alex, going into Glass?
Not really. To be honest with you. Well, kind of going with whether it's more of a shared universe or a trilogy. I think it's probably, I feel like it's more of the trilogy rather than shared universe. It'd be I think everyone kind of wants to tie everything. It's like, oh, Marvel's got a shared universe. Any two movies that relate, it's a shared universe. I think really it's just a trilogy.
So I think I kind of fall in the middle on this topic, because I think, yes, technically the Eastrail 177 trilogy is a shared universe because they all take place in the same universe, and Split is its own movie. It works without Unbreakable. Unbreakable is its own movie. It works without Split, but they both happen to inhabit the same space. The interesting thing about this, though, with Split specifically, is Split being in the Split being in the Unbreakable universe actually gives more context to the events of the movie, because you can watch Split just on its own as this weird supernatural psychological thriller, contained space thriller about this crazy guy that can change his body chemistry.
Mhm.
But then putting that in the context of the supervillain origin story, that all of a sudden you start thinking about Unbreakable and how Unbreakable tried to do normal human beings with slightly exaggerated, extraordinary abilities, and you put that in the context of, oh, Kevin is doing that. That makes it, I think it adds another dimension to Split. Now, Split, I think, works without it, but I think its connection to Unbreakable makes it more interesting. And I think that with Glass, it has the full potential to really let that all play out, because the first time you watch Split, if you don't know about the ending, you don't see it as a supervillain origin story. Then that end recontextualizes everything, and now you're going to watch the same character in a straight up superhero drama with him being one of the villains. But I do think that thematically all the movies tying together, and I really hope, especially with Casey's arc, it'll tie in a lot more into Glass. So I think that it is both technically a shared universe, but they also stand on their own as a thematic trilogy alongside the Three Colors trilogy, the Glaciation trilogy, the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I want to actually comment on is, like, as M. Night Shyamalan has been promoting this movie up to its production, he has often claimed, as he's kind of come back from this doing this resurgence again, he has claimed, like, he wants to treat each of these movies as their own standalone movie. Like, even though they do belong in this trilogy, that they all like have these characters interacting, he is treating each one as saying something new and not relying on the predecessor to continue the story. So it's still kind of very interesting on how Glass is going to pander out with he is bringing these characters back. He's going to try and resolve loose ends with these narratives, but he's still treating it as its own entity. And that actually just gets me kind of curious, because I think right now, everyone who hears the term shared universe or trilogy, they all have this expectation of it's this continuous narrative. And we did a podcast a while back on shared universes, and we explored this, how there are some universes or shared universes where they tried to have this ongoing narrative, and it's never really going to kind of end. It's just going to keep going and going. Whereas, M. Night Shyamalan, I think he really wants to conclude with this one, but still have it say its own thing. So I think it gets me really curious, because I think what he might be doing is he's going to break the mold that most of Hollywood is expecting now of these shared universes. And he might be doing something different and kind of break our expectations of what we're expecting.
Yeah, I really don't see how, like you're saying, Unbreakable stands on its own, Split stands on its own. I don't see how Glass is going to be able to stand on its own because of like the heavy reliance on the characters from Split and from Unbreakable. I feel like it's going to be really hard to be able for that to stand on its own two legs and present itself as its own movie.
One identity in an individual with dissociative identity disorder can have high cholesterol. One. There have been cases where one identity is allergic to bee stings. The others are not. The identities have different IQs. They have different physical strengths. One personality is a Russian weightlifter and can lift 3 times his body weight. Have these individuals, through their suffering, unlocked the potential of the brain?
I think I agree with Alex in this one. Only that, not having seen Glass, even in the marketing, Glass is in a very strange area where you have to market it talking about the connections between Unbreakable and Split. But the interesting thing about Split, and I thought about this after I saw it the first time, is that twist ending, I don't think it'll have the same effect on a movie-going audience ever again in the future. I think that twist ending can only work within the context of when people saw it in theaters when it came out. Because if you're a new generation of moviegoers and you're looking up movie series,
Mhm.
and you want to watch Glass. Oh, James McAvoy, Bruce Willis looks really cool. Oh, it's the third movie in a trilogy. I'll go back and watch the first two. So you go back and you watch Unbreakable, knowing it's part of the series. Then you watch Split, knowing it's part of this series. And that end stinger comes up. That's not a twist ending anymore. That's just, oh, we're reaffirming that this takes place in the same universe, and it's teasing Bruce Willis will be back in the new one.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. And I'm not saying that in a negative way necessarily. I just think it's very interesting that that twist ending only works as a twist ending at that one very specific moment of time to a very specific subset of people who had seen Unbreakable before seeing Split.
Yeah.
Because marketing Glass, like, you have to give away the twist ending to Split.
No, yeah, you have to. It's the only way it's going to work. Yeah. I mean, and that kind of brings up this interesting point of, like, why this idea of shared universes existed. Like, is this something that will only work for diehard M. Night Shyamalan fans to really appreciate, or is it something like just new audiences who don't know about M. Night Shyamalan will still embrace? Like, that's going to be the interesting, phenomenon we'll have to see when Glass finally does come out, is what the rest of the audience's reaction is going to be. The few things I just hope overall with Glass is that he resolves Casey's arc one way or another, that what she went through and what she underwent in Split gets resolved, and she comes out in the end learning something from this. If these characters somehow learn something or complete their arcs as well after interacting with each other, and that whatever M. Night Shyamalan was trying to say in this narrative kind of wraps up very nicely, that there are no hanging loose ends. Only because I feel like this only works as a trilogy and not as like a, we're going to go on and on and on and add more, spin-offs or whatever.
I agree. M. Night has said that if the ideas for future sequels comes up, he'll explore them. But for right now, this is it for him. As far as he's concerned, these three movies were what he set out to make from the beginning. This is what he has finally concluded with. I am very excited that he had a chance to do this, because I am a fan of Shyamalan at the end of the day, despite the problems he's had in the past. But I'm looking forward to seeing how he concludes it with Glass. I'm curious, will it have the crazy over-the-top tone of Split, or will it have the more grounded, somber tone of Unbreakable? I guess we'll see this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot to wrap up. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does it. I think he's probably going to go for a little more of the over-top stuff, because it's hard to not go with that with James McAvoy's character.
I would not be disappointed if they did.
Oh no, yeah. I think I like Split. Honestly, I think I like Split more than Unbreakable, at least more than I remember liking Unbreakable. So I would totally be on board for it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Do you guys have anything else to say or about both movies, shared universe, M. Night as a whole? As
long as M. Night Shyamalan makes a cameo in it, that's all I'm kind of looking forward to see.
Wait a second. I have something to say about that real quick. M. Night has a cameo in both Unbreakable and in Split.
Yeah.
Is that the same character? Like, can we presume that the drug dealer in Unbreakable went on to work at an apartment complex in Split?
I think that's actually kind of fun. See, that might be just like the little Easter egg people are going to be watching. It's like, yes, it's the same guy.
That'd be hilarious. His character was so weird in Split. I did not like it.
I think that's just see, I love like M. Night Shyamalan, how he took like the Hitchcock approach of like, I'm going to insert myself in all my films in one way or another, and just that's just like something that just tickles people's fancy when they go to see any of his movies. Is like, let's see where he's at, let's see how he's going to plan the story.
It's just fan service at that point.
Yeah, honestly, it won't be as cringy as it was when he did that in Lady in the Water. With
that was a mistake.
I'm the writer of the cookbook, and it's going to change the world.
Oh my gosh. And on that note, we will conclude this episode of the Film Illiterates podcast. Guys, we made it. We finished an episode.
We did it.
Another
finished 2 episodes in 1 year. This is a record.
Now, can we make it to 3 episodes? Let's see how far we go.
We're going to wait 2 years now. Nathan, where can people find you online?
I mean, you can obviously look at me on Instagram for Nathan Stone Films. Those are 3 words with underscores. I'm also, here on the Film Illiterates podcast and helping Joe make content, so you can follow me there. Yeah.
Awesome. Alex?
Obviously, you can find me here. We got a bunch of old Film Illiterates episodes to look through, so be sure to dig into those.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, if you want to check out what I'm listening to, I'm on Rate Your Music under Half Scrim, HALFSCRIM, all one word. I pretty much log everything I listen to on there, so you can follow along. Other than that, that's kind of the only place. I'm on Twitter, Alex D. Patton, but mostly just gonna find like Overwatch and Destiny stuff. So don't expect a whole lot of movies.
That was almost a cry of follow me on this radio thing. Do not follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't use. I pretty much just look at Twitter just for like updates on video games and like updates on like professional Overwatch. That's kind of all I use it for, to be honest with you.
I think also Alex is on to like, you know, to try and make sure he doesn't have too much of a scandalous Twitter feed account or history.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You definitely don't want
I
to
think
see that.
tweets.
Yeah, we've learned that throughout this past year already.
Of course.
And I am Joe Campbell. You can find me here. You can find me on Twitter. I manage the Film Illiterates Twitter account. So if you want to see me annoy people on Twitter, that's film_illiterates, I think, on Twitter. Just search Film Illiterates on Twitter. That's where you'll find us. You can find us on YouTube and at filmilliterates.com. Yep. And with that, everybody to the limit. I don't know. What did I keep it easy, folks. Have a nice day.
Yeah,
See you later.
Definitely go check out Glass and enjoy it if you can. And yeah, just keep following us. We'll be doing more podcasts.
This was
tweet at us, comment at us, let us know what you thought of either the previous movies, and once Glass comes out, we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
I failed our outro. I'm sorry, guys.
No worries.
Don't worry.
See, that's why we got
Saved
you
it.
back.